Welcome to today's session, conversation with Dr. Kakali Bhattacharya. My name is Abu Arif. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm one of the assistant editors of the Critical International Studies Network monthly newsletter and the periodic journal. I'm also a doctoral student in the Faculty of Education at Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. Today's webinar is divided into two dimensions. So we will start and end the session with mindful exercise led by Dr. Bhattacharya. And in the middle, I'll be asking questions about my wanderings on D/colonial methodology, followed by question from the participants. So before I introduce, rather, I should say, reintroduce you to CISN and Dr. Bhattacharya, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse indigenous groups. And we acknowledge with respect the history and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. I encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you are located and the indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. The Critical Internationalization Studies Network, or CISN, brings together scholars, practitioners, educators, students, and community organizations interested in reimagining dominant patterns of relationship, representation, and resource distribution in the internationalization of education. Beyond fostering engagements between the diverse critical perspectives, we seek to facilitate collaboration, the sharing of information about events and opportunities, and the exchange of knowledge and pedagogical resources. While the emphasis of the network is on higher education context, there are many resonance with K-12 and informal education context as well. While we welcome diversity of perspectives and engage in a spirit of intellectual generosity, including generous critique, several organizing orientations shape our work. They are A, challenging inherited epistemic hierarchies, B, thinking and acting translocally, C, fostering respectful relationship, and finally, facing complexity and complicity. If you're interested in learning more about us and subscribe or contribute to our monthly newsletter, then please visit our website. Dr. Kakali Bhattacharya is a multiple award-winning professor at the University of Florida. Housed in the Research Evaluation and Measurement Program, she serves as a qualitative methodologist for the College of Education. For the last 15 years, Dr. Bhattacharya has explored qualitative research through critical D/colonial, creative, transnational, and contemplative perspectives. She is the 2018 winner of the AERA Mid-Career Scholar of Color Award and the 2018 award of AERA Mentoring Award from the Division of G's Social Context of Education. Her co-authored text with Kent Gillen, Power, Race, and Higher Education, a cross-cultural parallel narrative, has won a 2017 Outstanding Publication Award from AERA and a 2018 Outstanding Book Award from International Congress of Qualitative Research. She was recognized as one of the top 25 women in higher education by Diverse Magazine for her significant contribution to social justice work and efforts to decolonize qualitative research. Additionally, she is one of the 6 distinguished scholars invited by the Association of Studies in Higher Education as a featured speaker for their 2018 inaugural Woke Methodology series. So, Dr. Bhattacharya, কেমন আছেন? How are you?
ভালো আছি, and I'm very fine. Thank you for asking, and thank you for bringing me here and introducing some home language to our conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. So if you recall, I met you last year, and when I was actually desperately looking for an academic mentor who would help me to move forward as I was struggling with finding my purpose in the academy. In fact, you asked me a question that, if I can imagine myself, my future without any barrier, like how it would look like, and I could not explain. And we have one common grounding is that in our language we share this rich language, Bengali, and we started having conversation even in Bengali, and I still couldn't describe you because uh, um, the blockages that have through these experiences that I found myself. Um, and I remember when I become your mentee, one of the first thing you taught me was mindful exercise called ground, clear, and protect. So I think as we embark on some deep conversation about research methodology, I think it will be apt if we start with a mindful exercise. So may I request you to take us through this journey?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I also want to do a short land acknowledgement as well. And I honor that I occupy and work through the University of Florida on the stolen lands of Timucua and Seminole Indigenous communities. And I affirm these communities' sovereignty, history, and experiences. And I also want to acknowledge the invisible labor that went behind putting this talk together, because it is quite a bit of work to put something together and to continuously coordinate. So to the people that are here who coordinated, Santiago and Arif, and then everybody else that I don't know who also assisted, my deep gratitude to all of you. So I am going to start with an exercise that I do that helps in not only bringing focus and clarity, but also building good boundaries as we navigate our world, whichever way we do. So if you are able to do this with me, I'm going to play some music first to make sure that you can hear. So let me click on that. Can you hear the music? Okay, excellent. All right. I want you to get very comfortable and sort of like Netflix and chill comfy, that kind of comfy. Make sure you feel your feet on the floor if you are sitting. And then I invite you to close your eyes or have a lazy gaze somewhere that you're not particularly going to get distracted. And then I want you to just take a deep breath in with me and a deep breath out. And each time you do a deep breath out, try to relax a part of the body that is a little stressed. One more time. Deep breath in and out. When you do the deep breath out, try to let the breath out through your lips as if you're fogging a mirror, and do it very slowly. Deep breath in and exhale. Take a few deep breaths in and out on your own at a pace that works for you. And I want you to imagine roots coming out from the bottom of your feet, grounding you to the center of the earth, as if you are tucked in there, locked into position. You can even imagine pulling at the roots to make sure you are grounded, you're held in place. And it doesn't mean that you're not able to fly or soar as high as you want. You can fly and soar as high as you want, like a tree reaching to the skies, but be stable as you grow. Be balanced as you grow. Have a place to call yourself home and grounded as you grow. Sky and earth are both valuable. These roots can be of any color, texture. They don't have to look real. They can be pink with glitter if you like. Doesn't matter. Whatever brings you a connection. These are the roots that take out toxins out of your body, give it to Mother Earth, and for Mother Earth to transmute it into something beautiful. These roots also let you know you belong here at this time, in this place, in this body, on this earth. And then these roots also remind you that your ancestors have walked the earth, and it connects you to the history and the ancestry of this world. And the next step is called clearing. The first step was grounding. The second step is clearing. Imagine a space of 6 feet around your body, and we're going to clear the space from every debris of all sorts of things that you're carrying in your mind, in your energy space. So we're going to clear it with water, wind, and light. Your choice, what you want. If it's water, then imagine standing under a shower or rain and seeing these debris around your body space be drained, going down the drain. You don't need to know what these debris are. You just have to have the intention to clear everything in your energetic space that is not yours to carry. Maybe a difficult conversation you had, maybe an argument you had, maybe a conflict you're negotiating at the moment. Whatever it is, for this moment, it is not yours to carry. You don't need to know what these debris are. Just make an intention. That which is not mine can be drained. That which is not mine to be carried can be drained. If you want to use air, you can blow away the debris with air. If you want to use light, you can transmute it with light. All debris gets transmuted to light. And then the last step is to protect. Now that you have cleared your space, imagine a bubble around you, 6 feet of space around you. This bubble can be clear bubble of any shape you like, round, rhombus, oval, rectangle, square, star shape, diamond, pyramid, whatever you want. It's a clear bubble with a filter on the outside layer. And you set an intention for the filter, and you say that which is only in my highest good can penetrate through. Everything else return to the center from the surface, transmuted with love. Because we don't need to add to the negativity of the world. There's way too much of it out there anyway. That which is only in my highest good can penetrate through. Everything else return to the center, transmuted with love. And this is the safe space you have created for yourself. My intention for us is that which is in your highest good. Let that unfold collectively as we co-create this experience together. This is also a discerning mechanism for you to know what have you let inside your sacred space, sacred inner bubble that is draining your power, leaking your power, and you can just put it outside of your bubble. Doesn't mean that you're not going to deal with it. You will deal with it, but you're not going to deal with it by draining your power. You're going to be mindful of the investment of your own energy into it. As you walk through campuses, roads, relationships, days, practice this GCP exercise a few times, especially before difficult conversations. It will give you clarity. It'll become a discernment tool. You'll get to ask yourself, is my power leaking? Have I given up my power? Is this in my highest good? Is something inside your bubble that is not invited by you? This is an invitation-only space, so be very snobby about what are you inviting in. a deep breath in and out. And then when you're ready, you can come back to your body, to this place, and to this conversation.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, thank you so much. This grounding, clearing, and protecting exercise has been such a huge, so helpful for me, especially when I'm engaging in decolonial work. So thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. So Dr. Bhattacharya, now we will move on to formally asking you questions about de/colonization. In your scholarship, you have argued, and I quote, there can never be a utopian space where qualitative inquiry can be free of imperialistic ways of knowing and documenting people's lived experiences. So please tell us why you feel the need to conceptualize de/colonial methodologies, what this slash denotes, and how this is different from decolonial and or critical methodologies.
Sure. Thank you for asking this question as a starting question. So when I first started getting into decolonial methodologies, this was very early in 2000s. The discourse that I found was from Indigenous scholars in global North countries, so US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, these places. And that's because that's who I had access to, that's who people referred me to, and so that's what I studied. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was very inspired. I was inspired by Gloria Anzaldúa. I was inspired by Linda Thuy-Smith, Batiste. I was inspired by a lot of very powerful decolonial scholars. However, I found like coming from a nation of once colonized state that has been divided into 3 states now, um, there are different types of decolonial agenda that once colonized nations have than a settler colonial nation state does. Some of the agendas overlap, but some of them don't, because once colonized nation like the one I come from is fighting over land issues in a very contentious ways, with its own form of colonization going on in our borders, Whereas in settler colonial discourses, there's a different type of agenda for decolonization, because the colonizers are still on the land of Indigenous people and are not only have taken land over, but taken over resources, created infrastructures, created all sorts of things that minoritizes the Indigenous population. So there is definitely an overlap, but the kind of work I wanted to do originated from a sensibility of being a part of once colonized nation. So I wanted to be true to that sensibility, because I noticed that Linda Thuy-Smith was being true to her Indigenous sensibility from a settler colonial nation. And Gloria Anzaldúa was true to, a mestiza consciousness from a decolonial understanding. So all of that was asking me the question, what does this look like for me? And then I realized that I cannot pretend to return back to a pre-colonial era, or have discourses of decolonization to a return back and a reclaiming, to imagine that the pre-colonial was utopian, because it wasn't utopian. There was Islamophobia and homophobia and transphobia and patriarchy and sexism and colorism and anti-Blackness and all of these things. And those issues are not easily resolved just by claiming some sort of mapping to a pre-colonial era. So there was no going back. There's only going forward, So going forward to me looked like a utopian dream of not being connected to anything colonial. So freedom doesn't have to come at the relationship of no longer being oppressed by colonizing forces, because even then you're still in relationship with colonizing forces. So freedom involved not even having that in our radar anymore. So this is a big utopian imagination. And then our current state of materiality, where we have to negotiate not only the forces of colonization, but interconnected structures of oppression, which is where more critical work is grounded. So, decolonial work often goes to the colonial forces of oppression, and critical work looks at other different types of oppression, and then critical theory is completely another different branch. So they have overlaps, of course, but very specifically, this work that I have been doing has been looking at the structures of colonization and its interplay with other structures of oppression, in the current moment, and imagining a future that is a future of free of any and all of these things. And as a result of thinking like that, I ended up writing Decoloniality with a slash. And then I ended up talking about it where you are in this hybridity of a consciousness. You have this desire to go beyond the current moment in a way that is freeing, and you have the one foot grounded in the current moment of reality, where people have to deal with an interconnected structure of oppression, one of which is colonizing structure. So that's the slash. It's a movement between the future and the current moment, and dealing with past damages at the same time.
Thank you so much. And one thing to note to folks, if you have questions, please and as you were listening to Dr. Bhattacharya, if some questions emerge, don't hesitate to post them in the Q&A section. And we will be taking those questions during the Q&A session. Now,
I actually can't see chat. I click on chat and it is spinning. So if there are questions, just relay them to me, because I am not able to see it. There's a lag on my end.
yeah. Absolutely, I will do that. And I'm seeing that lag in my chat section too. That's why I told folks to put in the Q&A. And yeah, yeah. Anyhow, in 2015, in your article, The Vulnerable Academic, Personal Narratives and Strategic D/colonizing of Academic Structures, you talked about how colonizing and decolonizing discourses exist in relation to one another. In that article, you took your readers on a journey where we learn about your stories of becoming a tenured professor and how you have used D/colonial strategies to survive academia as a woman of color. Now, given the fact that there are many entry points of researchers in decolonial work, in your opinion, is it important to clarify one's positionality when engaging with D/colonial research methodology?
Yeah,
And why? And why?
in every research, I think it's always important to do a positionality disclosure, and people do it differently. Some people will have like a section where they do positionality. Other people will integrate it throughout to demonstrate the influence of the positionality in the argument that they are making in that section. It's really important, especially because my area is qualitative research. And since qualitative research isn't formulaic, even though some people want to make it that way, but it's not formulaic, it's very much driven by the co-creation between the researcher and participants, research collaborators, research co-creators, that you want to make sure, like, how are you navigating this space, given that you are the inquiry CEO almost, like you are that person who's designing the study, you're the person who's building the relationship, you're the person who's in deepening those relationships, you're the person who's having conversations, you're the person who's gathering information, you're the person who's making sense of the information you've gathered, and then you're the person who's sharing the analytical insights that you have, and then you're the person who's talking about the so what of these analytical insights. So to present yourself as somebody who's somehow value-free, one agent of neutrality who's just reporting, isn't accurate. And it's a very Western structure of research to present a researcher neutrality or an objectivity. None of that is true, because all of that is a fallacy. And, there is no human inquiry that's devoid of one's humanity at all. And, you think about early qualitative researchers in anthropology, like Margaret Mead, for example, and she went to Samoan villages and she saw these women that didn't wear coverings on their breast and weren't educated and were raising children. And she did meticulous observation and recorded all of it, documented it, reported it, and then also analyzed it with a binary hierarchy, given her liberal, progressive, feminist perspective to say these women are oppressed because, they live in very uncivilized ways where they're walking around half naked and they don't have education and they're taking care of children. And in doing so, this thing just gets normalized that you can have an outsider gaze on a study, and that outsider gaze can create these type of interpretations. And it didn't require Margaret Mead's positionality. It is as if that is an universal understanding, and the thing is that seeing a human body in that kind of sexualized way and considering progress a certain way is culturally grounded, is positionally located, it's situationally connected to her history. But none of that came to bear in the writing. It was as if this is the only interpretation to be had. And I think that that's dangerous, especially when, people from different countries in the world, in the Western space, if they're not from any kind of European ancestry, is often seen hierarchically inferior than people from some countries with European ancestry. And so it's very, very important to locate yourself so that people understand that when you arrive at an argument, arrive at a conclusion, they understand what journey are you taking and why to come at that conclusion. So that positionality piece for me increases the trustworthiness of the study, and I can feel very confident in that study.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya.
Yeah.
Now, finally, my final question. Some scholars argue that the internationalization of higher education is an imperial project. Audre Lorde famously claimed that the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. Now, many of us in doctoral research on the internationalization of higher education, including myself, is in fact a practitioner in the field. So do you have any advice for scholars like myself, other practitioners who are embarking on a decolonial work while drenched in colonial settings?
Yeah, that's a messy question. That's a very messy question. I think, decolonial work is like pest control work. The pest control person comes to your home, and sprays whatever they spray to keep the pests away. But it's not like it's a permanent thing. It's not like in 1 minute or one visit, whatever they sprayed, all the pests are gone and you're clear. So you would have that person come back in another month or 2 months or whatever your frequency is. So decolonial work requires all of us to interrogate this ever unfolding layers of colonizing influences in our thought, in our education, in our policies, in our law. These are intricately interconnected, So when you understand that, then you understand that whether you're a scholar or you're a practitioner, there is an amount of interrogation and unlearning that you would have to engage in, and it's probably a lifetime's worth of work, So like when you understand one part of it and you peel the layer off, there's something else underneath that, and then that needs to get peeled off, and there's something else underneath that. And so as a result of doing the work, you are going to, the deeper you immerse yourself into the work, the more you're going to see the unlayering, or not unlayering, unpeeling and sort of unmasking things that were previously hidden to you. So I would say that would be your number one. Number two would be humility, having humility to build relationships when invited to certain communities versus positioning yourself as a savior of those communities. Lots of harm has been done in the guise of saviors, so it's important to not take on a savior stuff. If you are aligned with that, or if that feels like you're doing good in the world because you're saving people, or some people say giving voices, you can give people voice. People already have voice. You can listen, but you don't give anybody voices. You're not a voice bank who's like doling out certain tokens of voices to people. People have been speaking for a long time. It's how have we listened to them? So you don't give voice, you acquire deeper listening skills, you acquire deeper perspective taking skills, but you don't give anybody voices. It's not yours to give, you know. And having this humble posture of somebody who is a guest in other communities, especially if you're a cultural outsider to those communities, or if it's like a mixed community, you're still a bit of an outsider if you have not been invited. So you want to be invited into those spaces. You want to be humble, and you want to be relational. Your ethics have to be relational. And the best way I can say is you have to think about your ethics from a place of sacredness. You are in sacred space. These folks have sacred experiences. How do you honor the sacredness of those relationalities? And I think it doesn't matter if it's a scholarly relation or a practitioner relation. These things need to be, present regardless of, whatever you're doing, especially if you're entering a space to which you're not a cultural insider. It's very, very important to understand the posturing, the interrogation, and the relational ethics, and then everything flows from there.
Thank you so much. I am not seeing the questions in the chat box and in the Q&A section, but what I will do, I will stop sharing and see if that helps us to get the chat. My colleagues in the editorial folks are really helpful. They are sending me question in my WhatsApp. So thank you, Dr. Gutierrez and Dr. Watley and Chris. You all are amazing. Thank you so much. So the first question we have is from Michael Smith. Is the global north or global south is in a better position to manage the effects of the continuing growth of the global population? Is there a critical point in the future when we must be aware of this phenomena?
I'm not sure I got the question fully. Can you ask it again?
Yeah, so is the global north or the global south in a better position to manage the effects of the continuing growth of global population? Is there a critical point in the future when we must be aware of this phenomena?
So I'm not sure that I can answer that for different reasons. One is I'm not a population studies scholar, so I won't be able to answer it from a place of expertise. So probably it's a little bit out of scope of my expertise to answer it. So the best I could do is answer it more generally instead of the more specific nature about the population. I don't know that it's helpful to create a binary relationship between global north and global south to say that, you know, this is better equipped than that. I'm just speaking mostly in terms of like the damages that binary relationships can create, because then it sets one up against the other. And then my decolonial work is to build bridges instead of like walls and boundaries like that. And so another good thing to think about in that place is that, is there a pure space that is only global north without any infiltration of global south? Or is there a pure space that is only global south without any infiltration of global north? And the answer is no to both ways, because people migrate, people have access to technology. Technologies blur a lot of borders. Somebody can be sitting in India and consume all sorts of American entertainment and everything else, American discourses, American news, American everything, English news, Australian news, and they could be very strongly influenced by all of that. And we see that, at least in my birth country, we see that influence. And folks don't have to leave a step outside their own home to be influenced that way. So I don't know, I think the boundaries are blurring and the spheres of influences are moving in multidirectional way. I just hope that we can capitalize on these spheres of influence, not just for colonizing influences, but also for influences that are decolonial or anti-colonial, so that there is a more globally structured pluriversity of knowledge and knowledge sharing versus like knowledge sharing from one direction to the other.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a good question from my colleague and the editor-in-chief of our journal, Dr. Melissa Watley, is that does decolonial work have to be a qualitative project, and if so,
No.
why?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be a qualitative project. Decoloniality can be utilized as an epistemology, as an ontology, as a methodology, as a theoretical framework. So it just depends on what you want to know. You can actually do a decolonial global population study if you want to, and utilize quantitative methods to do this, or mixed methods to do this, or process-based methods to do this, or qualitative methods to do this. But you don't have to always do it qualitatively. I do it qualitatively because that's where I'm drawn to. But I don't think that it's limited to one form of inquiry. The methodology really is driven by what do you want to know? Like, what is the purpose of your work? What is your research questions? And that drives the methodology. But decolonial work is not completely restricted to qualitative work. It's just where my sweet spot is.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Dr. Watley is also a methodologist, but also works on the quantitative research.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
it.
There was earlier on, like I'm talking 15, 20 years ago, people thought any kind of anti-oppressive work can only be studied qualitatively. But quantitative research, has been making enormous strides in doing justice-oriented work. Crit quant is a legitimate field right now. So I mean, I'm sorry, I might be preaching to the choir for the questioner. So, I hope I'm not offending you, but I don't see a limitation on methodology to do decolonial work.
I think she is really happy to hear you saying that, and she wrote to me, glad to have her on record saying this. So another question is from Martin Descombe. How does your approach to qualitative methodology relate to contemporary Western approaches, critical, post-positivist, postmodernist, and feminist?
Um, that's that's a lot of things to unpack in that question. Um, Read it one more time, just so that I know the main thing.
How does your approach to qualitative methodology relate to contemporary Western approaches, critical, post-positivist, postmodernist, and feminist?
I think it's always informed by this because, I've been informed in a colonizing educational system in the West. So I was born in India and I left India around 12, 13, and I came to Canada actually. And I did my high school and undergraduate work in Canada. So my high school was in Mississauga and my undergrad work was in McMaster. And then I did a postgraduate diploma in Toronto. And then I moved to the States for my master's and my PhD. So I don't know how I can divorce myself away from critical postmodern or even feminist sensibilities. I think I carry them with me as well as a decolonial work. But I do appreciate this question because I have been very, very much very consciously engaging with things I have forgotten or things that have never been taught. So what I have been doing is I have been reading literature, discourses from Indian freedom fighter, purists, activists, creative folks, artists, poets, from when the British was in rule, because these were the people who, after 400 years of enslavement, still held a vision of freedom alive and enacted it by the British leaving. And I want to learn from that too, in terms of, how can I inform my current day work with that sensibility? And because I speak and read and write multiple Indian languages, it's very helpful to not read it in English, to
Mhm.
have a sensibility that comes from a native language, because the 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 thing that is messy is that I can't say all the things that I'm saying right now in Bangla with this level of a theoretical sophistication, because I don't know how to speak academic Bangla. I can speak conversational Bangla, but academic Bangla is another thing, whole other thing. So imagine people who haven't gone to college can speak English perfectly, but when they hear us, they're like, "What are you saying? We don't understand that." Academic Bangla would be the same. I'm a regular street person. I don't know how to talk in academic Bangla. So I'm already speaking in English, trying to convey a sensibility that is beyond the Western stuff. So I can't claim a pure space of decoloniality. So which is why I write it in this hybridized form, because it's hybridized. I don't know what the pure space would be. So Black feminist scholars influence me, Indigenous scholars influence me, and some postmodern scholars influence me too. I don't necessarily know that they would consider themselves postmodern, but when I read Foucault, I was very informed and influenced by that. Deleuze and Guattari's Rhizome was very influential in thinking about decentering. Any kind of deconstructive work that I learned from Derrida was very helpful as well. So I do think that I am informed and influenced by it, but I am choosing and trying to privilege uh, a more historically congruent, culturally aligned understanding for myself to model that. So as a result of that, I ended up creating a theoretical framework that was more diasporic framework, and we called it, and it's also slash because I have to live in this hybrid space. And so the framework, there's an article on that in two places I have written about it, and it's called a Pardesi framework. So it's PAR/DESI, Desi. Desi means people from the homeland, and traditionally it caters to countries in South Asia, and Pardesi is people outside the homeland, so insider, outsider kind of thing. And I created that to understand the hybridity of our existence as insider, outsider, and the shuttling between that back and forth. So I created that framework, and that framework really represents this influence of multiplicity and feminism and criticality and then decoloniality altogether. Because my brain is one brain. I can't tell my brain that, oh, when you're talking about this, only think this, because it's already interconnected. So if you're going to think colonization, you're going to also have to know colonizing forces have also created racialization. You're going to have to know when the colonizers are brutally physically harmful to you, you know, or blew up, a chemical plant in India that was Bhopal, blew up a chemical plant, it's creating disabilities as well. So these things are interconnected, they're not separate. So I can't pretend like, oh, once we solve colonization, we're done, we're good, because we have to sort of have all hands on deck in every one of these interconnected sites and structures of oppression. Obviously one person's cannot do all of it, so we have to kind of build these solidarities and networks across our work so that we all can do this together and disrupt and dismantle all of these structures of oppression.
Thank you so much. There is a lot of question coming in, um, but I will be random and also do some partialities. Uh, so there's a question about from Cosmin Nada. How do you see the colonial epistemic ramification that currently affect qualitative research? As a qualitative researcher, I often feel that I have to justify, defend the validity of my research, which is often undervalued and questioned by the main scientific quote unquote guard dogs, whose mindset is obviously influenced by quantitative assumptions.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something we talk about in my intro class, actually, because it's a conversation I want to have from the get-go, not like when people are more advanced, you know. So the first thing I would say is, I don't try to defend the work quantitatively. I just don't, because how can I? You know, it's not aimed for the same thing. So first, it's there. Qualitative research is generated from primarily from US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. You know, these are, and Canada, of course. You know, and these are the sites. These sites are predominantly white sites as well. Most of the scholars whose books that you do read, textbooks for qualitative research, are white, and so qualitative research and whiteness centering sensibilities have been paired for a long time in that way, and positioned as value neutral, as if this is the methodology. So I have seen so many critical work, including decolonial work as well, where there's a lot of theorization of decoloniality, criticality, feminism, postmodernism, whatever, you know. And then when you get to methodology, folks are still doing very traditional methodological stuff because it has been presented as neutral, like as if that is a historical, a cultural, a theoretical, but it's not. It's just normalized to be that way. So in the work that I do, I start with like a framing, a worldview framing. Like, so if your worldview framing is decolonial, let's say, right, it brings a set of assumptions. So those assumptions are what I utilize for what the methodology is going to be, and what the methods of data collection is going to be, what the methods of data analysis is going to be, and what the methods of data representation and what the standard of rigor is going to be. So when I publish anything, I make that clear. This is driven by this theory. Therefore, to be in alignment with this theory, I have to do this work, not this other thing that you knew. If I'm going to produce a counter narrative, I cannot utilize previous modes of producing narrative, because previous traditional modes of producing narrative doesn't produce counter narrative. You cannot hold that steady, pretending that it's not, you know, value driven. It's definitely value driven. It's not value neutral. So I line up methods of inquiry with the onto epistemology. I line that up, and then I argue for that. And then if somebody says what's generalizability, depends on how. Like, so if it's in a journal and somebody's making that criticism, I would just say the reviewer has misread this article and is trying to assess the article from a positivist perspective. However, this article is not aiming to be a positivist article. It needs to be reviewed from a constructivist perspective, favoring decolonial onto epistemologies. Like, I will say that to say that the reviewer has not done their due diligence to know my field, you know. If it is in person, like conference or something where somebody's flexing, you know, so I would then invite them. I would be like, could you share with me some of your understanding of qualitative research, from where you think that rigor should be defined this way? And usually when I ask that, they don't have an understanding, or they have an understanding that is very positivist. So at that point, I would say what you're saying is only a very minor part of a very small slice of qualitative research that's driven by positivism or post-positivism, but there's a lot of qualitative research that are driven by other philosophies of inquiry. If you're interested, I can share some resources with you and we can have a conversation later. This is me saying, I play in this playground. You don't. I have been playing in this playground for 20 years. I know every blade of grass in this playground. I will invite you. You are my guest in the playground. You're not an expert in the playground. You have yours. I'm not claiming to be an expert in quantum physics. You have yours, but you are trying to make my playground look like yours, but it doesn't. It won't. You know, I like purple and blue grasses in my playground, so I have them. Your playground has green grass. I honor your greenness if you can honor my blueness, you know. This is all subtext. I'm not obviously saying all of this. I am saying I'm going to be invitational to you because my first instinct is always to build bridges. But if you are going to be a jerk and you just want to take me down, we're not going to have a dialogue. If you're going to be somebody who's a curious engager, I'm happy to engage in a discourse, but I need you to read some things first before we can, because I can't give you an entire field and history of research as a soundbite in a conference talk. I cannot give you in a paper because that's not my job, because plenty has been written. If you haven't read it, then read. I could do footnotes and say, see this, see that, see that. I could do those moves, and I do them a lot, because I don't want to continuously defend qualitative research, and I make sure my students who are doing dissertations aren't put in that position to defend qualitative research, because a lot of times you would find them talking about the limitations of the study where they're apologizing for doing qualitative research. In that limitation of the study, they would be like, I am so sorry, my sample size was so small and it's so not generalizable. Well, did you set up the study to be generalizable? No, you didn't. You have purposeful sampling or convenient sampling or criterion-driven sampling, but it's all not at all random. So you can't really create generalization because our process of inquiry is different. Our assumptions are different. We're not trying to get to one truth and capture the truth and have predictability and replicability of the truth. We pretty much situate ourselves as, whatever RF is experiencing and I'm experiencing and Santiago is experiencing, we could have all three different experiences and not one can be any more correct than the others. We just have to understand the context in which this experience happened to come to these type of sense making.
Thank you so much. Although we do not have time for us taking any more question, but this is one of my favorite humans in this whole white planet. So Danai Belanger asking, historically, education has played a big role in colonization and imperialism. How can people of color operate in this system when the very tenets of post-secondary education are rooted in our erasures?
Absolutely. That's a very powerful question too. That is the work that I am doing for the last 15 years. I'm unlearning. I'm continuously questioning things that I take for granted, oh, this is the way you have to do that. I'm unlearning all of it right now. So I'm unlearning this by going to the education I didn't receive. That's why I was saying that I was going back to, so I would say read ancestral literature, read outside of education, read novels, fictions, engage with other people that are not like knowledge makers of academic articles, like stand-up comedians. They are very good. Stand-up comedians are very good. They are the astute court jesters. They understand everything at an expert level, and they deconstruct things, and they make things so absurd. They take it to the absurd extreme so that you can see what is happening. And there's much to be learned from people who are theorizing on the streets. So there's an chapter I've written that says theorizing from the streets. So I would say learn from sources outside of post-secondary education. And then if you're an educator, bring those sources in post-secondary education to normalize it. But I have been doing a lot of that work where I'm but I've been doing it for a while, but I'm more directly claiming that these are my sources. So right now I'm working with a children's literature author's work from when he was in British India, and he generated a lot of satire and imagery and whimsy and dream worlds, to challenge British imperialism in every place, including education. And he did it through nonsensical world making and kind of like how Alice in Wonderland is, but more Indianized, And so I am learning from that, and I'm creating similar things inspired by that, because I have to go and remember things that I've never been taught. So I think as folks of color, we have a responsibility to bring forward other forms of understanding and knowledge making, to disrupt it and to put it in our spaces. And as much as I can, whenever I see that happening, I end up sharing that in my network with everybody else as well, so that people have an understanding, so we can utilize this global networking system to spread the knowledge. And knowledge doesn't have to live in post-secondary approved academic readings. It can exist everywhere. So the decolonial approach would be to make sure that you're sourcing yourself from beyond the post-secondary boundaries.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. So that takes me to a poem that I want to share, written by Tagore, who did not go to post-secondary institution and was a Nobel laureate. So I'm going to read some verses from his poem in Bengali and then translate it into English before I hand it over to Dr. Bhattacharya to close. So it reads, "Bipode more raksha karo, e nohe mor prarthona. বিপদে মোরে রক্ষা করো এ নহে মোর প্রার্থনা বিপদে আমি না যেন করি ভয় দুঃখ তাপে ব্যথিত চিত্তে নাই বা দিলে সান্ত্বনা দুঃখে যেন করিতে পারি জয় সহায় মোর না যদি জুটে নিজের বল না যেন টুটে সংসারেতে ঘটিলে ক্ষতি লাভিলে শুধু বঞ্চনা নিজের মনের নাম যেন মানিক হয় আমারে তুমি করিবে ত্রাণ এ নহে মোর প্রার্থনা তরিতে পারি শক্তি যেন রয় আমার ভার লাঘব করি নাই বা দিলে সান্ত্বনা বহিতে পারি এমন যেন হয় নম্র শিরে সুখের দিনে তোমারে মুখে চাইব চিনে দুঃখের রাতে নিখিল ধরা যেদিন করো বঞ্চনা তোমারে যেন না করি সংশয় the English translation of it is not my prayer that you save me from all the perils. I pray that I should not fear when faced with odds. Console me not when I am torn with misery. Grant me instead the will to win against grief. If no help comes forth, I let my strength not crumble. When losses abound and I am deprived of everything, let my heart not take this as defeat. Protect me from the storms is not my prayer. Bless me the strength to sail through. Need you not comfort me, lightening my burden. Bless me instead with the fortitude to bear. With that note, I pass it on to Dr. Kakali Bhattacharya to close this wonderful session. And I'm super thankful for your time and your generosity, and also super thankful for my entire CISN team, Dr. Santiago Costeleco Gutierrez, Chris, Dr. Melissa Watley. Thank you so much for organizing this event. And Dr. Kakali Bhattacharya, it's
Sure. All right. Well, I don't know where this went. Sorry, my YouTube prints. Maybe this is the one. Yeah, there. All right, got it. All right, get yourself comfy again. We'll do a very quick meditation. This is the affirmation meditation. So get yourself comfy. And on my exhale, on my count, exhale everything out of your body. So I'm going to count 3. 1, 2, 3, exhale. Okay, I'm going to do 3 count of inhale, 3 count of pause, 3 count of exhale. And you're going to breathe on my count. So take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, inhale. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, exhale. One more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. One more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. I want you to put your hand, both of your hand, at the center of your chest and just say it quietly. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. And match this to your breath, however that makes sense to you. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. Take a few minutes to say this to yourself quietly, or you can say it out loud in your room if there is nobody around you. I'm enough, just as I am. I'm enough, just as I am. I'm enough, just as I am. Your mind wanders, it's okay. Just come back to your breath and remind yourself, I'm enough, just as I am. I'm enough, just as I am. I'm enough, just as I am. Now imagine a part of your life that gets to be benefited immediately if you operated from this belief fully, not half-heartedly, not a day where you're feeling good about yourself, but consistently and fully believing you're enough just as you are. What area of your life will be benefited instantly if you believe that wholeheartedly? And then if you could think of a color that matches with I'm enough just as I am. It could be any color of your choice. Just think of a color that you associate with I'm enough just as I am. And then visualize this color lighting up all of your cells in your body. I'm enough just as I am. Maybe your color is blue. Imagine all of your cells glowing in this beautiful blue. Awareness of you and that you are enough just as you are. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. Beautiful. And then think about one thing you would now do from this place of realization today. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. I'm enough just as I am. Take a minute, say a note of gratitude to anything or any being for being able to co-create this space together, this conversation together, this time together. We have so many busy things to do in our day, but we make time for this. Whatever, whoever you want to send a wave of gratitude to, take a minute and do that. Visualize it as this color from your body is being smoking out to these people or beings. So if that was blue, then feel this blue smoke coming out of you and touching the folks or beings you're grateful to. Take a deep breath in Thank you for joining us.